welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And for our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts about this podcast. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino-Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it on Substack at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, a hurried Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Still jet lagged, Lei. Usually it takes about a week, but I woke up at 3 a.m. this morning. So good morning from my side. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 166. The two of us are finally back in the same EDT time zone. And before we begin, a couple of milestones. You had mentioned the YouTube edition of 163, but this past Monday marked the 3-year anniversary of our officially posting our first episode of China EVs and More. So we pat ourselves on the back. It's been 3 years already. Time flies. And the other milestone is I tweeted yesterday that the third week of May, China new energy passenger vehicle registrations accounted for over 50% of all passenger vehicles registered that week.
So more than not.
So keep that in mind as we, talk further in this episode.
If we're peeling layers of the onion back a little bit, it's interesting, or it will be interesting to see how much ICE sales have continued to fall to get to that 52%, as opposed to absolute growth of the NEV sector. Now, there's likely growth in the NEV sector, but I'm sure the shrinking ICE market also plays a huge part in getting to that 52%.
Yeah, so speaking of that 50%, it felt like, the cities that we've been to, right? Whether it was Beijing, Shanghai, Zhengzhou, Changsha, Shenzhen. It felt like every other vehicle on the road had a green license plate. So it perfectly matches, the numbers, right? At least from the real live perspective. That's how it felt like to me. So
there was a conversation I had this week, Lei, with a skeptic, and he pointed to the fact that these numbers are fake. There's all these graveyards. So I invite anyone who thinks that these sales aren't real or the numbers are exaggerated. First of all, foreign automakers do business, publicly traded foreign automakers. So I don't think they're cooking their books and booking sales volume that is not actually there, number one. Number two, I just invite you to go and visit these places. To your point, Lei, especially in the tier 1 cities, there's more green plates than not. So,
and that needs to trickle down to the tier 3, 4, 5 cities, right? Where it might not be as high. But one example that you brought up about of the possible graveyard, we saw one in Shenzhen. Do you remember? Yeah. There was supposedly a graveyard of BYDs, and we were there. We saw it, but a couple of days later, I sent you a picture. Those cars were gone. I wonder where they went.
Probably on a boat, on a Ro-Ro.
Yeah, or BYD Explorer or something. But speaking of, I think I just saw your tweet about the Model Y production reduction, the 20%. I think this is pretty the latest news. While Tesla invested in that groundbreaking of the Megapack in Shanghai. What's your take?
I think that they can't hide anymore. I think that there's a real severe fall off in demand for their product. I think that the Model Y did everything it could, but there are just so many other products out there that are much more competitive, and the Chinese consumer has moved on. Again, this goes back to what I said last week, Lei, about no sacred cows from a branding standpoint. Xiaomi, I think, has some brand cachet, but outside of that, you get the impression that Neo is kind of on the cusp, but everything else is about features and value currently in the China EV market. So,
Yeah, I guess, speaking from a momentum perspective, it's definitely what Tesla is confronting is definitely different than, let's say, what Xiaomi is confronting, right? It's exactly the opposite. The volumes are still pretty good, I think. 20,000, 30,000 units a month. That would be the envy of anyone, right, in the market. But
Lei, but I don't know how much, and this is where we can't know precisely, because how much of a pull versus a push, because they have to build something every month. And at 1.2 million units, if they're delivering 50, their capacity utilization is, if they're delivering 50,000 units, their capacity utilization is 50%, which is unsustainable.
And there's so much you can do on the incentive side, right? There's the 0.00% that they just announced a week ago. What more can you do? And the other tweet I saw was Eunice. She tweeted that 2030 20 million target is no longer in the right. That answers your earlier question that we talked about many episodes ago.
So we knew that 20 million target was never realistic, but it was a stretch, obviously.
Yeah.
But now it's official. It's dead.
Yeah. I mean, the realities are setting in. In particular, we heard two earnings calls from two of the three U.S. listed, Li Auto and XPeng. And, right,
Yep.
I think Li Auto delayed the launch of the BEVs. They were supposed to launch 3 BEVs following the Mega, but that's delayed until next year.
And have you heard about the validity, Lei, of the Li Auto rumored layoffs?
Well, I think Li Auto is currently going through that restructuring phase like what XPeng did maybe a few months ago. And XPeng itself, right, they just hired a new
sales chief,
sales chief from, was it a smartphone?
Yeah, I forget.
Was it Oppo or was it
I'm not sure.
It was outside the auto industry, right?
So they're taking a page out of Neo's playbook and Xiaomi's playbook a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for Li Auto, it's been consecutive. So first, dialing back their guidance, right? That was something they announced earlier this year. And then this latest earnings call delaying the BEVs, and now the latest supposedly round of layoffs.
Really quickly, for those that are not familiar with what you're talking about, Li Auto started the year with an 800,000 unit forecast or goal, and they've since dialed that back significantly to, I want to say, 500 or 600,000, something like that.
I think it'd be lucky if they get to 450,000.
I agree.
Based on the current outlook.
I agree.
And competitive environment. So that's a huge drop.
And this, with the L6 being their high runner, the L6 being the smallest 5-seat e-Rev that they've just launched, I think it's going to be pretty popular. And let's say it's going to be 30, 40, upwards of 40% of their sales in 2024, I would think. And that's how they're going to get close to that 450,000 unit sales volume.
Well, it's that. I think the numbers they put out was about 41,000 orders in about a month for that model. And then the 789, which had their prices cut a month or two ago. And they kind of, in an earnings call, they said they don't expect to make any more price movements. But who knows? Depending on the market conditions, that could be still a card that could be played.
So, Lei, as Li Auto gets more conservative, Xiaomi doubles down and said, we're raising our forecast from 100 to 120,000 units.
Well, the way they put it was to ensure we deliver 100,000 units, but to strive for possibly 120,000 units. That's their
But
official
that's
word.
that nali 不好意思 kind of stuff. So meaning that I'm being modest is effectively what I'm saying.
I just think Xiaomi has just beaten, every expectations imaginable.
And what's important to note, Lei, is that this is a sedan. This is not an SUV. China is like the United States. It's a crossover SUV country.
Yeah, that's the 100,000 units of SU7s alone, right? Not the second model is for next year. It'll probably come out later this year, but sales would commence next year. And you'd think that given the current momentum and the fervor, they could easily double whatever they sell this year in 2025, right?
And they have a lever. I think that I don't know if they really want to ramp anymore because they want to keep production and quality manageable.
So right now they definitely have a capacity constraint, and it looks like they're gonna have that second, what they call the Giga, their own Giga, up running probably in about, I don't know, 12 to 18 months time. So by about, this time or maybe a little bit later in 2025, right next to their current plant to, they had the SUV coming up and then the third model. Yeah, it's definitely not demand, it's capacity constraint.
And not to take anything away from their sales, they're also doubling down on intelligent driving and have talked about 1,000 people dedicated to building that out in order to compete with NIO, Xpeng, Huawei, Li Auto.
That number will double to 2,000 by next year. And they're rolling out the city NOA in 10 cities in May, by the end of this month. And then nationally, I think by
Do they have an official name for it?
It's just NOA, just NOA, city, urban, NOA. So
stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the constant stream of dire climate news? Turn that concern into action. Tune in to the Climate Confident podcast every Wednesday morning when I bring you good news and real solutions from the front lines of climate action. Whether you're in business, tech, or just passionate about sustainability, the Climate Confident podcast is your weekly dose of optimism and inspiration. Subscribe to Climate Confident on your favourite podcast platform and start your Wednesday with hope and actionable insights.
Yeah.
So we got to think about this in the terms of generative AI, and think of Xiaomi as more of a technology company than a true car company, at least from a mindset standpoint. And I would see how Apple is using AI and project that out a little bit to how Xiaomi might use generative AI or AI to kind of create more stickiness and demand. Because again, remember that they have the Mi platform that connects all of their commercial, consumers, and now transportation products together. And right now it's like they're firing all cylinders. They can't do anything wrong. I was actually quoted in an article this past week, Wall Street Journal, that talks about how Xiaomi learned how to gather all this data, and they already have this huge foundational database of information from hundreds of millions of consumers, not just Chinese, by the way, hundreds of millions of consumers that they can use to experiment with small little products. Because, and I'm talking hardware and physical products, because they knew that some consumers would be turned off by the touchscreen. So they sell this super cheap add-on that uses physical buttons to do the same thing to a touchscreen. So
yeah. And then one of the things that's happening next for Xiaomi, I heard from one of the owners that I talked to, is they're going to have this feature where if you leave or let's say you drive your car and you're within a vicinity of your home, then you have a preset. Once you enter that geofence zone, all your other Xiaomi appliances that have been preset can be turned
Right.
on and off, right? Without you having to, press
Yeah.
anything.
So it's just like turning on the air conditioner, turning on the lights, doing things like that.
Yeah, because the system knows that your car is near all your other devices, and trying to make that car home 人车家, so human car home work, right?
And we're only scratching the surface of how incorporated into our lives the transportation part of our daily lives is going to be. Because again, I think we take for granted how much time we spend in vehicles, especially in China. If you have your own vehicle in a tier 1 city, you're sitting in traffic, probably moving 20 kilometers. In Beijing traffic, that might take an hour and a half. So think about that. There's a lot of opportunity to, pop up something on your touchscreen. Hey, I know you're 20 minutes away from home. What if we use Meituan to order some food for you so that by the time you get home, 2 minutes later, the guy's there delivering your food, right? So that's just a simple thing.
Yeah.
Meituan, guys, is like Uber Eats or like DoorDash, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah. And then another company also named starting with an X is also pushing ahead. And I'm talking about Xpeng with the launch of the Mona. And He Xiaopeng basically said this Mona, the first A-class model, will be the best looking A-class electric sedan below 200,000 RMB. And one of our friend, I won't name who, has different opinions about that.
I think China Driven should trade in his ET7 before it loses any more value and get maybe 1.5 Monas.
And then another B-class sedan from the Xpeng brand is yet to be launched by the end of the year. And they recently pushed out this AI 10G 5.1, which we experienced during our road trip, right, on the G9.
So let's switch topics over to your thoughts on Tavares' comments in Munich for the Reuters conference.
It's about the tariffs, right?
Yeah, just tariffs and competition, stuff like that.
Well, now he has the lead motor.
My God,
that's his Chinese offensive.
You saw his, there's pictures of him on the internet with smile ear to ear, grinning with all his teeth showing. So he feels he's in the driver's seat, I think.
Well, he in fact was in the driver's seat of one of the lead motor C11s or something. So obviously, right, he has interest in bringing lead motor into, let's say, initially not the US, but obviously Europe and other markets that Stellantis is in. So not surprising at all that he would kind of, using this Chinese offensive to go against the Chinese offensive.
So I had said a while ago, there's going to be Chinese IP in European cars in the next 20, 30 months. And Chinese IP in US cars probably within the next 4 years. And again, the same conference, the same meeting, I made that statement. And there were people in that room that were incredulous, that were like, are you kidding me? How could that ever happen? And so, they don't really know who I am because I wear a different hat depending on certain meetings. Because I'm also, and this, Lei, I'm also a mentor for entrepreneurs in the mobility space in Detroit. And so sometimes I wear that hat and they only know me as that, as opposed to the Sino Auto Insights guy. So they're like, who's this guy? Right? Like, why is he saying this? And so I don't do it for shock value, but the shock value it does create is kind of eye-opening. And unfortunately, this tells me that you and I need to probably focus a little bit more on the West, less on Europe and more on the United States, and try to educate these folks a little bit more thoroughly, Lei. So
Yeah, and similarly for anybody that has a great, even for someone like a Stellantis who no longer may have the kind of the production footprint as they used to have in China, but who has enough interest through these type of new partnerships. Similar with Elon saying yesterday in the Viva Tech conference, right? He's not in favor of the tariffs for EVs nor for the gasoline vehicles. And the German big three, the CEOs, they've already made their opinions known, right, publicly
Well,
about the
and
tariffs.
not to mention that they knew that the Chinese government was going to target them, ABB, and that's what they're doing preliminarily, right?
I mean, 25% would hurt someone like a BMW because they export a significant number of BMWs made at the Spartanburg plant in South Carolina to China.
I think we can say, like, pretty confidently, like, generally speaking, the high-end vehicles, the M, the R for Audi, the A8s, the 7 Series, the S Class, they're all exported to China. And
Sure.
going from 10 to 30% is a significant increase in tariff. It scares the heck out of ABB, and they knew it was coming. Now, I also said that China was probably going to wait until at least January 2025 before they really did significant retaliation or on the U.S. So,
Well, I mean, China said specifically that 25% increase was within WTO
right.
rules. Uh, it's like, they're saying that that's not a retaliation, but who knows?
The other thing too, and you probably have more history on this than I do, is that these guys, ABB is what analysts in China call Audi Beamer Benz or Audi Benz Beamer or BBA interchangeably. These guys would just book profits off of these high end S Class and Maybach, 7 Series, 7M, G500, and so this is a cash cow that they could lose out on, especially not only due to an increased tariff and pricing pressure, but because of the local competition, the Yangwang, the Fangchongbao, and some of the Lotus, Polestar, Volvo. So they're already feeling the demand squeeze from domestic players, and then the tariff is going to squeeze them on the other end. So
Yeah, and Porsche would be one example where their sales falling.
I don't think these are willy-nilly, oh, we're going to keep it in place, but only for a few months. Once these things are in place, they're going to be locked in for a while. But to revisiting,
Well,
go ahead.
No, it'll be interesting. Pretty soon, I think June 5th is the date that was mentioned about the EU voting that they could make some kind of announcement of these tariffs on the Chinese EVs, which I believe are coming. These tariffs. The only suspense would be, how much? 10%, 30%, 40%, 50%. But I think they're coming as a matter of level and when that will be announced, but probably not as high as the 100% from the US.
Oh, there's no way.
We keep an eye on that, and then see what happens from on China's side.
My guess is 25. So
yeah, I mean it's probably not as drastic.
But for those that didn't know that Tavares was interviewed by Reuters, I can summarize I summarized it in this week's newsletter. Tariffs will cause inflation. It's only pushing out the inevitable fight between China EV Inc. and Foreign Legacy Inc. And we're talking in Europe and the United States. Restructuring is needed for all of these legacy automakers, full stop. And we're talking about engineering, manufacturing, R&D, sales and marketing, after sales service. Every part of the business process needs to be restructured and rethought through from a legacy automaker standpoint. Yeah. Unions, and this is the surprising thing. He had mentioned that he's gotten good initial feedback from unions being flexible to try to accommodate their needs. Now, this doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of an initial statement he made. And I think this is important, Lei, because you and I have been for 3 years now kind of talking about this. Effectively, he said the time is now. It's not a year from now, 2 years from now. The time is now to make these significant changes. And lastly, he said that there's going to be overcapacity. If we believe there's already overcapacity globally, it's going to be exacerbated by these tariffs. And when you look at overcapacity, we're not just looking at the end product. We're looking at battery manufacturing. We're looking at mining, refining, all of the above, if there are walls. Now, again, I'm not a politician. I empathize with both sides, but if anything, I lean more towards the legacy automakers being a bit lazy and not able to make those tough decisions. Tavares, he cheated. And I say that in jest a little bit, but he kind of bought his way into a competitive position because 15 months ago, Lei,
which is smart.
Yeah, no, but 15 months ago, he was the laggard. Now he's the leader, or at least he feels he's a leader. So I think that's important to note.
Yeah.
The other thing, have you seen Polestar's share price?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. So
I know NVIDIA has been going up like crazy, but
one of the other posts in my newsletter, and the title was "Going Low," and then in parentheses low, ER, right? So there's two things. Polestar is trading at 84 cents. It's struggling. I think the tariffs really, so it was already kind of struggling, and then the tariffs were announced, and I think that just kind of pushed it down even further. 84 cents. And so the other thing is our friend and a friend of the show, Steve Levine, former guest, he had written this week in his newsletter, a very, very good newsletter that's a little bit expensive to subscribe to. Steve knows, we tell him this consistently. He said that LFP is $47 a kilowatt hour right now. And for those that don't follow batteries closely, a largely held belief, generally speaking, among the battery community is that below $100 per kilowatt hour, companies start making profits on EVs. CATL is at $47. So there are, and you and I know Steve to be very thorough. Okay. So I don't think this is speculative and, you can't believe him because he referenced research. So it's not something that he had researched himself, but that means somebody's making money on the battery side and somebody's making money on the EV side. Okay. The price war creates this cloud of uncertainty, but once that cloud is lifted, it'll clear up all of the doubt about can car companies make money at the mass market level. At least they can in China. There's likely no way Europe or the United States gets to $47 a kilowatt hour ever.
Yeah, which is that Mona, the 100,000 to 200,000 RMB. But luckily for Xpeng, they've got a hand from Volkswagen, which contributed several hundreds of millions of RMB in the recurring revenues in Q1 already. And that's why their margins went up, I think. So this is something that others don't have, right? So there's different tactics that you see.
One thing that Lei, and I don't know if you know this, but I didn't read the Mona presser or information that closely, but I was told that Mona is all also going to be vision only. It's not going to use LiDAR.
I haven't heard that, but I believe is that LiDAR will be used because it's going to be first used in a kind of the 100,000. Well, Lee Motor already has that, but I believe it'll still have LiDAR.
Okay, got it.
Most likely from RoboSense because they just recently signed a deal. I could be wrong, but I believe that it's going to have LiDAR.
Okay. The other thing, Lei, that I wanted to really bring up very quickly, and this is more of an update unless you have comments, is that BYD is launching its latest gen of the dual mode or DMI system,
Yeah,
hybrid system next week.
That's like their fifth generation or something.
Fifth gen.
Already. Yeah.
And here's the thing, guys. I think it's only guys, so I'm actually accurate. They're looking at 2,000 kilometers on a full tank and a full charge. For those that think, because in the West, especially here in Detroit, everybody still thinks Toyota's hybrid system is number one.
So I just tweeted that Dongfeng Aeolus just launched the L7, what it calls the plug-in hybrid range extended EV with combined range of over 2,000 kilometers. So that's already becoming a new kind of the next battleground, right? Who's going to have the 2,000 kilometer car? And more are coming, including BYD, including others. And I just happened to, yesterday, my Santa Fe hybrid, like during the summer, spring, the mileage is really good. And I did over 650 miles on a
Nice,
tank,
dude.
a hybrid. Yeah, it's like over 41 mpg. Since I haven't been here, my wife has been driving the vehicle, but she drives a bit slower and more ease. But
she doesn't have a lead foot like you.
It's over 1,000 kilometers, right? Which is already good. Now you have something that's double that. Like what?
So this is important to note, Lei, because you bring up a good point. We were talking about this 5th gen DMI. Technology is still moving forward, and it's being led by these Chinese companies. And so if we take a picture in time, if we're German legacy or US legacy, take a picture in time and try to catch up to that picture, we're still going to be behind. So they need to leapfrog in order to lead, which is the really challenging part, in my opinion.
And it's through years and decades of iteration, right? We always kind of think that this is over the last couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, and there's more than that, right?
You and I know this. BYD sucked for a very, very long time.
I shouldn't say this. But there's still improvements.
No, without question.
But yeah, I know what you're saying.
I can't stress to you, and we've said this in previous episodes, but I can't stress to you how impressed I am in not from a design standpoint, because that's an individual thing, but from a quality, reliability standpoint. I get into these Chinese vehicles by NIO, by XPeng, by Li Auto, and I can't help but project out to my old colleagues at GM, old colleagues at Ford who are in Dearborn and Detroit, and they would be shocked at the level of quality of these vehicles. I kid you not.
Also, now I remember a photo that was tweeted by someone of the Chevrolet. Was it the Silverado EV? The cockpit? Yeah. I think.
I retweeted it and I was like, "Are you serious? This is a $75,000 interior."
I think part of the reason is that we've been spoiled. I think that's part of the reason, but also, yeah.
Well, it did. It looked straight out of the 80s, and it looked like it was pieced together. It didn't look cohesive at all. And then, honestly, if I was one of the designers for that interior, I'd be a little bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
So other than that, was there anything else you wanted to chat about?
No, I mean, just most recently, I think the 009 Grand, or there's some other term for it, was delivered to Zhou Hongyi, the CEO of one of the latest KOLs, was delivered to him, the CEO of 360, also investor in Neta. And right, I think he traded in his Maybach or something for the 009 Grand or something.
I used to get Neta and Leap Motor confused because they kind of play in the same low price.
Yeah.
But Neta is also called Hozan, or Hozan is the company that owns Neta,
Hozan, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Parent company or something. And then NIO opening that massive 7-story NIO house in Amsterdam.
Oh, did you want to comment on Li Bin's thoughts on the tariffs and everything?
Well, I mean, it's the same as what everyone else said, right?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because guys like Li Bin and He Xiaopeng and Li Xiang, they've only been in the space for 10 years, so they're kind of collateral damage a little bit, which is unfortunate. But hey, everyone, thanks for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Yep. Likewise. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Li, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.